let's just begin with your very public schism with the administration, stepping down as ambassador to Ukraine, specifically because you don't like the direction that the Trump administration is going in. You've been very critical of the president's tack here, especially meeting with Putin in the absence of having Ukraine at the table. So let's start there.
Yeah.
Why are you so critical of the administration's handling of the war in Ukraine?
Well, thanks so much for having me on. I mean, first and foremost, there just isn't a strategy. Normally in diplomacy, you want to think through what your goals are and then use power and your resources to achieve them. And that's just not happening here. For one, there's now a meeting with our president and with Putin, and Putin has not offered any concessions, including a ceasefire. So this is a big mistake and a win for Putin right from the beginning.
What sort of concessions would you want to see the Russians make to have the president speak with them in this formal way?
Well, I think first and foremost, there needs to be a ceasefire. It's hard to imagine how to end this war without the start of a ceasefire, which Ukraine has already agreed to. But in general, we need to know what it is we want to achieve. And there are major consequences for the United States, for Europe, in how this war ends. And we should be focused on a result which helps ensure Ukraine's freedom, that also deters Russia from further aggression, and that sends the right signal to China. But because this was not in place, I had to step down and speak out. That's why I'm running for Congress from mid-Michigan, my home state.
Let's also talk about some of the other geopolitical things that are going on. There was this very widely talked about, maybe actually not that widely talked about, but a deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which was a long time in the making, and a lot of people thought that there couldn't be a deal hinging on this corridor, but the Trump administration was able to make it happen. Now, there are some asymmetric allocations here that give the United States a lot of advantages. Do you see a parallel with the minerals deal, for example, in which Ukraine is pledging 50% of these revenues to this joint fund? Are we looking at some sort of asymmetric eventual conclusion here in which Ukraine is going to have to cede a significant amount of territory, up to a fifth of its territory, along with keeping intact the previously negotiated mineral deal?
Yes, well, I mean, we should be approaching this in a way that advances U.S. interests. So first and foremost, our interest is to, as President Trump has said, help end the war, but help end it in a way that is secure for the long term. And peace at any price is not peace at all. It's appeasement. And again, for me, this is why I had to step down and speak out, and why I have decided to run for office and to try to oppose policies which are bad for the United States at home and abroad. But more generally, in this situation that's happening on the ground, the situation's getting worse and has gotten worse since I was in Ukraine and left in April. More civilians have been killed in July than any other time of the war since May of 2022.
Right. I think something else that has sort of come to light that is very confusing for a lot of people. The minerals deal that was signed back in April specifically excluded security protocols with the United States. And I wonder if that undermines, in your mind, Ukraine's position here. And if it does, how so?
Well, I think you're exactly right that security is actually the key to peace and to long-term peace. And that is the issue that we should be discussing with partners and allies. This could be security under a NATO rubric. It could be a security of a coalition of the willing, but this is what is going to secure peace for the long term. The minerals deal, I think, is also an important piece of the partnership that we should have with Ukraine in the future. But that also requires security, which underpins every part of a just and a durable peace.
All right. How soon do you think we could come to some sort of conclusion here in getting, potentially Zelensky to the table? The president has made it clear he's not going to be bargaining on behalf of Ukraine. So, what kind of
Yeah.
timeline do you see?
Well, obviously, I think for us, it would be good to have this war end as quickly as possible. And as I said, it has gotten worse in the last few months, not better, under President Trump. So if he comes to the table with a clear vision of what he wants to achieve and how to achieve it, I think it's very possible to end it quickly. But here's what we would need to do. We would need to work closely with partners and allies to increase sanctions and increase pressure on Putin to stop funding for the war machine. This is sanctions in the energy sector, sanctions on Russian banks. We also would need to get a hold of the 300 billion in Russian assets. And these could be used to help pay for more weapons from the United States to help Ukraine protect itself. So there are two ways for us to help end this war quickly, but we have to work together with democratic allies and be forceful in using American power.
Yeah, on the question of American power and American interest, you said that clearly you're putting American interests first. And objective observers could say, well, the President Trump is putting America's interests first because of, according to him, the $350 billion in aid that's gone to Ukraine from the United States. Now, between 2022 and 2024, defense budget spending is about $182 billion. So there is a little discrepancy there, but still, we've given billions of dollars to Ukraine. And that there has to be some, besides peace and stability and protecting a sovereign nation, that it's appropriate for the president to demand certain things from Ukraine. Do you agree or not agree?
Well, I completely agree. We have given $105 billion in assistance to Ukraine to help Ukraine defend itself. The European Union has given more than the United States. But that's a lot of money that we have given, and it's an investment. Half of the money that we gave in security assistance, that's about $60 billion. Half of that actually went to go replenish our own defense industrial base. But moreover, to the point, our effort to help defend Ukraine is to help create a partner and an ally that we can be together with and can work with us as a security partner, a diplomatic partner around the world, and importantly, also to the Trump administration, economic partner. That means that we are investing in this relationship because we believe it will pay off also in the future. So yes, we have invested a lot of US taxpayer money, but I believe there's a way to end this war without investing a significant amount more of US taxpayer money and to make sure that we benefit from the investment we've already made. We don't want Ukraine, its very powerful fighting force, and all of its innovation and technology going to Russia. That would not be in our interests. So it would be much better for us to find ways to work with Ukraine so that we can be partners in the future that would benefit both of our countries.
There are some estimates that Russia controls about 19% of Ukraine's internationally recognized borders, and obviously Crimea, significant portions of Donetsk and Luhansk are under the control of the Russians, and there isn't a lot of hope for many experts who evaluated this that those territories would be given back to Ukraine. What sort of territorial settlement do you see for Ukraine that could preserve some integrity of the sovereign nation?
I think it's too soon to talk specifically about territorial result of this war. I think the first thing to hammer out and figure out is the security piece. How will Ukrainians feel secure? If you look at what Ukraine has accomplished since the beginning of the war, Russia controlled much more Ukrainian territory at the start of this war. And Ukraine, essentially, with our help and partner help, beat back the largest military in Europe off of 50% of the territory that Russia had taken. Now, since that time, and especially in the last few months, there have been increasing gains by Russia because we have not continued our support and we have asked partners to do more. We've seen Europe step up, and this is a good thing. But we've got to help finish the job to secure our own interests, and we can do that. But we've got to show commitment, and we've got to be willing to put pressure on Putin.
Let me ask you also about sanctions. And it appears that the West and the United States haven't pulled the trigger on the most severe sanctions that they could, even though GDP growth there has contracted by more than 2% after Western sanctions went into place in 2022. Still, Russia's wartime economy, because of the wartime industrial complex, has remained afloat. Why? Well, let me ask you this. To what extent should the United States be working with Western allies to cripple Russia financially to bring a close to this war?
Well, that is one of the top things that we should be doing. You know, President Trump is doing a lot of things, for example, with tariffs, which are actually hurting Michigan families and parts of our country in ways that are avoidable. What we need to use is our economic leverage and policy to both make life better for people in Michigan and across the country, but also to put more pressure on our adversaries like Putin. So economic sanctions absolutely need to be increased, and they can be. We can increase them in the energy sector, specifically on secondary sanctions on oil would help diminish the amount of money that is going to fund Putin's war machine. We can expand our sanctions on Russian banks. We have limited that so far, so we could do that, and as another way to make it harder for Putin to pay for this war.
All right, and I want to ask you also about the optics of all of this, especially because President Zelensky is not at the table. Would there have been a way to do that, to bring all three parties together in your mind?
Yes, of course. I think it would be very easy to bring President Zelensky, and also I would advocate for bringing key members of Europe who are and we want to be stepping up and doing more to support the success of this policy and to end the war, and also make sure that it doesn't continue and that Russia's aggression can't continue. I think it's very possible to do that, but here again, there's no strategy in terms of how to prepare for a meeting this big and important. You never want to come away from a meeting like this with no outcome, or worse, a bad outcome. And without the preparation and without doing it in a way that is strategic, there's a big risk for that. And as I believe, a meeting in itself is a win for Putin.
I want to ask you, I think this is the final question before I just ask you if there's anything else that you want to say or you think that's important about the summit that we might take from it. Obviously, the world, and you have to assume China is, and you alluded to it earlier, China is clearly closely watching what happens with Russia and Ukraine if there is a settlement reached here, because China sees Taiwan as an integral part of its territory, even though, of course, the dynamics, geopolitical dynamics between those countries is very complicated. At the same time, if there is a deal reached in which there are significant changes to Ukrainian borders, could China see that as a tacit acceptance of allowing a sovereign nation to be redefined based on a global superpower, which in this case would be China, paralleling Russia's achievement, if that comes to fruition? Do you see that?
Well, you're exactly right that the way this war ends has global consequences. It is deeply important to the United States how this war ends, and that it ends in a way that does not encourage other aggressors to do the same. For example, China with Taiwan. So it should and must, I believe, end in a way where Putin does not come off as the winner of having undertaken and started the biggest war in Europe since World War II. It must be very clear that he does not win in this case. And this is why you need a strategy to figure out how best to use our power and our friends and allies to make sure that that's the case.
And there is one thing I want to ask you. For people who would say, all right, this was just totally political for you to leave as ambassador to Ukraine and run for office. What's your how do you respond to that criticism?
Well, I would just say that I believe that the policies of the Trump administration are harmful to the United States, both at home and abroad. And for this reason, I believe that I needed to do something to try to affect those policies in a way that I believe would serve our country, my district, our state, our nation, in a positive way. And I think, The only other way to do it if you're not inside the administration is to do it from outside the administration. I believe in America. I believe in American leadership. I think if we don't lead, our adversaries step in. I saw that personally. And I also think at home, what I see is that the same chaotic, reckless policies that predominated in foreign policy are happening right at home in my backyard. And so things like the reckless tariffs, which are raising prices for everyone, the big ugly bill, which are kicking people off health care and making life harder, are the opposite of what we need to do to have a strong America that gives opportunity to everyone. So I'm deeply committed to it. I spent 28 years as a public servant serving our country all around the world. So it's a very critical moment that we face right now, and I'm ready to do whatever I can to make sure it comes out in the right way for America.